Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order of the RTC. May I have a roll call?
Chairperson Bagwell,
Present.
Vice Chair Schutte, Commissioner McQuarrie, Commissioner Stedfield.
Here.
Oh. Commissioner Terry.
Here.
Quorum's present.
Thank you. Let's see. Does anyone have any disclosures that they're going to be making on any of the items? We're good. Are we going to change in the agenda?
No changes from staff.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to open up public comment. Do we have any public comment?
There's no public comment at this time.
No public comment. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 5A, which is possible action and discussion regarding the approval of the February 10th, 2021 minutes. Do I have any corrections needed? I'll accept a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of the February 10th, 2021 minutes of RTC.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes as submitted. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Good. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 6A, which deals with the federal lands project reimbursement agreement. And is that Dirk? Nope. Chris is going to take us through that one.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Martinovich, Transportation Engineer. This item is to discuss approval of modification 002 for the Federal Lands Access Program reimbursement agreement for the Kings Canyon Flap project. This modification changes the city match and other non-eligible funding from $185,000 to $285,000 with a reimbursable amount due to Central Federal Lands of $227,750. The modification also changes the period of performance from July 30th, 2021 to July 30th, 2023. So at the last RTC meeting, we talked about the 95% plans that were updated and presented here to the board, the RTC. At that time, Central Federal Lands also updated the construction cost estimate, and as part of that update, which included the construction items, the project scoping, the project design, project right-of-way costs, utility relocation costs, and construction management costs. So the overall project increased from $3.7 million to $5.11 million. This is a 95% federal funded, 5% local match project, so the city would be required to pay for that 5% local match, plus any non-eligible funding. The reason for the cost increases are kind of laid out there on the second page of the staff report. That's back at page 12, where we talk about some changes due to increased earthwork, due to changes to address public comments and changes to the parking area and the roadway itself, as well as other storm drain improvements down at the lower end and property acquisition and utility relocation costs. A portion of these costs, as I kind of mentioned, a portion of these costs is treated in kind. So while we're increasing our local match to $285,000, we only are having to reimburse Central Federal Lands $227,000. And that's because a lot of our costs for right-of-way acquisition, for our survey efforts are used in kind. So we're getting credit for spending that money ourselves rather than having to pay Federal Lands to spend the money. So that's kind of how that in-kind process works. The funding for this project comes from a variety of sources, and Table 3 on packet page 13 in the staff report talks about where the funding for this project comes from, particularly the local match portion. The RTC funds were previously obligated in the amount of $200,000, which included staff labor as well as contingency. Some of that money has been spent on our labor. That is not eligible as a local match or in kind. Other funding for the project comes from the Open Space Advisory Committee. And at the February 22nd meeting, I believe, this past February, the Open Space Advisory Committee added an additional $33,275 for the project. And there were also additional stormwater funds being added to the project. So our total local funding obligation for the project is $291,525, which is more than the $285 that we need. So we have enough to cover that local match. The exhibits attached, Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 are the statement of work, and Exhibit 2 is the actual modification that will be executed for this agreement, outlining the $227 that we owe Central Federal Lands as part of this project. I'll just update real quick on the construction side of things. The Central Federal Lands has indicated they're planning on bidding this project sometime in April, and construction is anticipated to begin at the end of June or early July for completion at the end of October. So with that, I'm happy to ask or answer any questions and go from there.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have a question?
I have one.
Yeah,
Ms. Schutte? I'll come back to you, Chaz.
Sorry, Chaz.
Okay,
So
that's all right.
just so I understand this correctly, when you mention the right-of-way costs as part of the in-kind match, right-of-way for, was that the driveways and that kind of thing, or?
Yes, so, and I forgot to mention that in my presentation. So the right-of-way costs are for actual property acquisitions. We have to obtain 5 easements for this project. And so there are costs associated with obtaining those easements. And ultimately, those will have to come to the Board of Supervisors for approval, probably the mid-April timeframe is what we're looking at. And I'll just take this opportunity to again, thank the property owners up there in Kings Canyon who have been patient, and we still have a little bit of work ahead of us, probably the most painful part's coming. But I appreciate their efforts thus far, so.
Thank you.
Mr. McQuarrie?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, do you know if they're going to use a local testing firm for this construction work?
I don't know for sure, but my initial conversations with Central Federal Lands is that basically what they do is they have 2 people on site, they take a sample and they FedEx it to Colorado for testing, and then they send the results back. So I don't think they're going to use a local firm.
You know, the reason I ask is I'm going to vote for the motion because, you know, we really don't have any choice. And when you look at the big picture, I guess it's a good deal. But I really have a hard time with the cost, quite frankly. And when you look at their numbers, they're spending 30% of the total budget on design, testing, construction management, which I just wish I could get that much when I design something. I mean, it is huge. Anyway, but with that in mind, what Chris just said is one of the reasons. Instead of using sort of local on the ground knowledge and expertise, they take it all back to Colorado in this case, where they work out of, and it just increases the cost. You know, when you look at it from a city's perspective, it's, I guess, not that bad a deal since we only have to match 5%. But when you look at it in an overall picture perspective, it's not really a good way of doing business in my mind. I mean, I'm doing a little venting here, and there's nothing we can do about it. But I just wanted to get that out in the record. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McQuarrie. Mr. Stedfield?
So being the other civil engineer in the room, I have to kind of echo what Chaz was saying. On top of which, I have a hard time believing that they blew the estimate initially so poorly, because the increase is what, about 40% over the original? It's kind of crazy. I don't know about you, Chaz, but I'd get a good chewing on if I missed it by that much. But again, you know, I kind of agree with Chaz. You know, we kind of got to do it. Big picture, it makes sense, but yeah, and I really agree with him on the testing. I mean, that to me it seems like something that could be part of the contractor's contract. You know, to take care of the testing. I mean, they still have to be transparent about it, but at least it would be a lot more efficient and a lot more cost effective doing it that way. So anyway, that's just my thoughts.
And I'll clarify. Thank you, Mr. Stedfield. I think what they do is they have the contractor do the quality control testing, and they just do some acceptance testing to make sure that the contractor is doing the right thing. So the contractor, I believe, is on the responsibility to making sure that the quality control testing is taken care of.
Yeah, okay, that makes a little bit more sense, but I also agree with Chaz that 30%, that's a really nice contract. I think the most we ever get is about, what, 10? Something like that. So anyway.
And then on this project, didn't we also have scope change, though? So the project itself, if I look at the construction contract portion, that went up not quite $1 million. So is that cost changes because of the length of time that we've been working on this project, plus some scope changes? So I think more than one thing is occurring here that's causing the contract to become larger.
Yeah, I think when the project was initially scoped out by federal lands, there was a general, they hadn't done survey, right? And so when they actually did the survey and they estimated how much soil, how much dirt they had to move for the parking lot, and they actually started that design, I think it was significantly more than was anticipated. And you really don't know that until you get into that survey and you do that three-dimensional analysis that kind of tells you, here's how much we actually have to move. And I think it was more than anticipated. And that is probably one of the most expensive components on this project, pavement and earthwork. Those are expensive components, so.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any, if I don't see any other questions, I'll accept a motion. Ms. Schutte? She's looking for, we got a lot of paper today.
Okay.
I don't know, heavy lifting.
I move to approve modification 002 as presented and to authorize the RTC chair to execute future amendments to the agreement regarding changes in the period of performance or in funding up to 10% of the approved agreement amount.
I have a motion. Can I have a second, please? He's like, yeah, can I get that?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the modification as stated on the agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Any noes? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We're going to move to agenda item 6B, which is discussion and action on a required report. Mr. Goring?
Thank you, Chair. So this item is presenting the total mileage of roads or streets that are maintained by Carson City. As of December 31st, 2020, Carson City maintains 303.42 centerline miles of public roads. Each year, staff calculates the total centerline miles based on new roads added, changes to the network, or changes to maintenance practice. And then we submit this geospatial information to NDOT, the Nevada Department of Transportation. The total miles of roads/streets are used to calculate the annual motor fuel tax revenue for a portion of the state's mandatory county gas tax. So this does not include the county option fuel taxes. For a road to be eligible for gas tax compensation, it must be classified as a type C or greater road. A picture of the type C road is on packet page number 26, but generally speaking, this type of road is gravel or better and is graded in a way that the water runs off the road and does not pool. Typically, these roads are in Carson City right away. However, if Carson City is maintaining a road in another jurisdiction, such as the National Forest or say the BLM, then we can add those roads to the roads that we maintain. Examples would be Ash Canyon, Parks, they maintain Ash Canyon Road, and then also the Brunswick Canyon that we have an affluent pond. So we maintain a portion of that road as well. Exhibit 1 on packet page number 27 provides a map of all the roads. I want you to please know that Kelly Norman put a lot of work into the maps, so I want to give her a lot of the credit. She went through all the line data and kind of did some comparisons to what we did last year and this year, and all the changes. So if the commission believes that there should be other roads, please let us know, and staff is happy to look into them. The next step in the certification process is for staff to submit the data to NDOT, who may perform an audit and ultimately certify the mileage for Federal Highway Administration. This number may change based on NDOT's audit. NDOT may find that portions of the roads do not qualify as a type C, and in such case, we would have that discussion with them and share what we have, and then they would share what they have, and then we would kind of move forward. So that concludes my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
How many miles did we have last year?
We had higher. We had 317, but we found some errors. And afterwards, we had discussions with NDOT, and so there was some stuff that was pulled off. There were some roads. One example is a small example, but there's a road that was off Kings Canyon Road that was going to the water tank, and so it's gated, and so it wasn't a public road, so we took that one off. So there's a few other ones that we worked with them, and so that's why there was a change.
Thank you. Do I have any further questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Chaz?
I move to certify the total mileage of improved roads or streets maintained by Carson City as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. McQuarrie and a second by Mr. Terry to approve the motion as submitted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, item 6C on the agenda tonight deals with discussion and action regarding school zones, speed limit signs, and $300,000 for an opportunity to do some improvements in our school areas. Chris, are you gonna start us on this one? Oh, I just also want to note that we received public comment that came in on the record, and I just wanted to validate for Mr. Shamirza and Mr. Vattel. I think there was one more. Is it behind John's? And wasn't there a third one?
Just two that I.
Oh, just two. Okay. Just wanted to let you know that we did receive it, and we'll talk about any impacts or items during the discussion. Thank you. Mr. Martinovich.
I'll kick this one
Oh,
off,
you're gonna
Madam
start it?
Chair, if you don't mind.
No problem. Sorry. So I'm up there and automatic.
Lucia Maloney, Transportation Manager. Just want to give a little background on this item. At their June 4th, 2020 meeting, the Board of Supervisors adopted Resolution 2020 R14, and this designated school zones throughout Carson City. This was the first time that school zones had been reviewed and redesignated in almost 30 years, since spring of 1992. The proposed school zone designations were developed through consultation with school district risk management, school district principals, the sheriff's office, an outside transportation engineering firm, and the district attorney's office. They're based on industry best practices and state law. Key concerns from stakeholders that we were trying to address included inconsistent speed zones, days and times, and signage across the city that we heard resulted in driver confusion and challenges with enforcement. There's also a general desire to increase safety in the city's school for the city's school-age children. There's been a rash of crashes involving student deaths and incidents in Nevada over the last couple of years. In Washoe County alone, between August 2019 and March 2020, there were 31 injury crashes involving students traveling to or from school, 3 of which were major injury crashes, and 1 was a hit and run that resulted in the fatality of a 14-year-old high school student. We want to avoid that here. We've been really lucky, and our drivers and our schools are really safe. At the July 8th, 2020 RTC meeting, staff presented revisions to the speed limit policy to clarify standard speed limit signage protocols for school zones. The signage protocols approved at that meeting included a standard static speed limit sign that noted 15 miles an hour from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Following the RTC meeting, staff worked to implement a project to implement those revised school zone signs throughout the city. And I would say the project was complex, to say the least. Sign locations were identified and mapped. Extensive outreach was conducted to adjacent property owners. Both in-person and flyers were provided. Refinements were made at sign locations with many in-person meetings at resident houses. And then additionally, during the implementation project, 2 corridors were identified as undesirable for the static standard signs. And those were Solomon near Fremont Elementary, and then Fairview at Desatoya near Empire Elementary. On those 2 corridors, there was existing infrastructure that allowed us to retain flashing speed limit beacons, and that gave us more flexibility to turn the school zones off in the middle of the day and allow those high vehicle corridors to not be impeded by that lower speed limit. After implementation of the new school zone signs, staff did receive calls both expressing gratitude as well as frustration. I can summarize the calls I personally received into 4 categories. 1, thank you for making the changes. It's about time the city did something about these speeders. 2, we appreciate the changes, but why in the heck did you make East 5th Street 15 miles an hour along that full corridor all day long? Can you take a look? 3, signage on the west side between Fritch and Boardwick Bray and Carson Middle is very confusing. Can you take a look, and is there anything you can do to clean that up? And then 4, why is Winnie Lane a school zone? It's too long, it's too slow, I don't see any children. So between those 4 kind of categories of comments, those are things that we, as staff, really looked at. We did receive, as Supervisor Bagwell mentioned, a handful of public comments after staff reports were published. Written comments have been provided to the RTC members, and those were also posted on the website as late material. We also received 2 phone calls. More or less, all the comments received fell into those categories I just mentioned. I did receive one of the phone calls that mentioned concern about the flashing beacons potentially having an impact on resident windows, potentially early morning or during the winter. This is a concern staff are aware of, and when Chris goes over the maps in a moment, just know that the proposed tentative locations of any additional flashing speed limit signs, we've sort of vetted those to mitigate those concerns. Before I ask Chris to run through the exhibits, I do want to say a couple of things. This project involved sort of an unfunded review of school zones for the first time in 30 years. We planned and anticipated for an observation period, and we knew that as traffic patterns adjusted, we would observe new things, and we would come to a point where we would need to adjust certain things. And so that's what we're doing here now. 2, I'd also like to mention that the 2020-2021 school year has been abnormal, to say the least. We heard from the school district that 1/4 of the students within the district opted for all distance learning, while the remaining 3/4 of students attended school in one of 2 cohorts, only attending school in person 2 days a week. And so some of the comments related to, I haven't seen any children around, why is this a school zone? And so while those comments are still valid and very important, we also need to take them with a grain of salt as anecdotal evidence during, a very abnormal time. Finally, at the January 20th, 2021 meeting, the Board of Supervisors approved the use of $300,000 toward further evaluation and refinement of signage. Without getting too far ahead of our skis, the exhibits in the staff report are kind of staff's first review of what are the critical school zones, and if we had, a limited amount of funds, where would we prioritize as staff that money? We're looking for direction from the RTC, and as we think ahead to the end of the presentation, we have not budgeted out all of the proposed changes shown in the exhibits. Staff feel fairly confident that we can achieve more or less what's provided within. But where we could use your help as RTC is where we could prioritize. If we're over budget, what are the lower priority items? And likewise, if we're under budget and we can expand to additional school zones, what are your highest priorities and where should we focus? So with that, I'll ask Chris to go through the exhibits for you.
Thanks, Lucia. So I want to touch on the exhibits that were provided as the packet, and I think there's the first cover pages up here on the screen. We really focused on four school zones. We focused on Fritch Elementary School, that Mountain Winnie area, Boardwick Bray, Carson Middle on King Street, as well as Eagle Valley Middle School over on 5th Street. So that's what the exhibits each show, and we're going to talk to tonight. The possible changes to each of these school zones really include a variety of items, including the removal of static speed zone signs, those static 15-mile-an-hour signs, and replacing them with potentially installation of the flashing beacons. And these flashing beacons, these aren't the rapid rectangular that you see at crosswalks. These are the round yellow balls that flash alternatively in the signs that say when flashing, just to clarify what a flashing beacon is in this case. We're also looking at potentially adjusting some of the sign locations, both for the beginning and end of the school zones. We're looking at placing additional speed feedback signs. These are the signs that flash the speed. When you're driving down the road, they flash if you're speeding, then they flash slow down or whatever they happen to say and they're programmed. We're also looking at potentially some other changes to infrastructure to accommodate the new signs and sign supports and otherwise enhance pedestrian safety at some school crossings and other miscellaneous signing modifications in these school areas for further compliance with the MUTCD and to reduce some of those potential conflicts that were identified. So I'll refer you to the maps here. I've got the cover map up on the page. So Fritch Elementary is in the upper left, and then Eagle Valley is next to that on the upper right. Boardwick Bray and Carson Middle are shown here. And so I'll just kind of step through each of these school zones and kind of talk about the shapes and bubbles. So the bubbles on these maps, there's green bubbles and there's yellow bubbles, and there's light green and there's light yellow and dark green and dark yellow. So those represent buffers from the school zone. In reviewing where a school zone should start or stop, we looked at first NRS, Nevada Revised Statutes, and Carson City Municipal Code, and there isn't any specific guidance in either of those as to indicate where a school zone should or shouldn't start or stop. But the MUTCD, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, does provide some guidance in terms of where a school zone should start or stop. The current version of the MUTCD indicates that the beginning point of a reduced school speed limit zone should be at least 200 feet in advance of the school grounds or school crossing. In other words, 200 feet from the actual physical location of the school, or 200 feet from a crosswalk, either adjacent to the school or a crosswalk where a school crossing guard is located. So what these maps show here, the light green on these maps, that's the 200-foot buffer from the school ground. So that's the physical location of the school. The light yellow, that's the 200-foot buffer from the school crossing. So if we look at Fritch in the upper left corner of this screen, those two crosswalks on Winnie Lane and Mountain, those are crosswalks where the school district has a crossing guard to help people cross those intersections. So we've identified those as school crossings, which is why they have the yellow buffer around them. The MUTCD is currently being updated, and a draft version has been published for public comment. That new version, anticipated to be probably approved sometime late this year or next year, changes the buffer limit slightly and changes the language by adding some additional guidance. It indicates, in addition to the 200-foot buffer as the minimum, the school zone should not be greater than 500 feet. So in order to kind of show that potential change, the darker green and the darker yellow on these maps is that 500-foot buffer from the school grounds, or that 500-foot buffer from the crossing location. So that kind of gives you the picture of where our school zones, based on the guidance in the MUTCD, should start or stop. The other thing I'll mention on these maps is there's those darker green lines that run along the streets. Those green lines represent the approved school zones as approved by the Board of Supervisors resolution that Lucia mentioned last summer. So you can see in some cases, we've got potentially, primarily at Fritch, in this case, we've got a portion of Winnie Lane that's quite a ways outside of those 200 and 500-foot buffers. So there's a potential possible change where we could maybe change the size of the school zone through a resolution with the Board of Supervisors to get that closer to the actual guidance in the MUTCD. So I'll step through Fritch here first and kind of describe a specific map. So this is Fritch Elementary School up on the screen. The map on the left side is what was installed and placed this past summer for the 2020 school year. So these are the sign locations that are in place today if you were to drive down the road. So you can see the same yellow colors. You can see the 15-mile-an-hour static signs. You can see those existing beacons. Those are those little sun solar beacons. Those are those little sun shapes. And then you can see the speed feedback sign there along Mountain Street in particular. The map on the right side of the screen, this is one potential revision that staff could implement as part of this project. And the red circles show the areas of change. So if you look at the circle on the first circle there near El Rancho Drive, there's nothing circled, and that's because we're proposing to remove that end school zone and move it to a different location. So all those red circles indicate a change to a sign, either the removal of a sign, the change of a sign, or the installation of a new sign. And so you'll notice here on Fritch and at Winnie Lane in particular that we're removing some of the static signs on Winnie Lane and we're installing new flashing beacons at the intersection of Mountain Street and Winnie and at the intersection of Division Street and Winnie to account for those school crossings. And a potential change could also be to reduce that school zone, well, I should say, an effect of changing those beacon locations would be to reduce that potential school zone on Winnie Lane to only be from Division Street to Mountain Street. So that would make the school zone slightly less long on Winnie Lane. I'll mention that another advantage of the beacons is they give us the flexibility to adjust the times that the school zone is in effect. And so Lucia mentioned that on Solomon, we have the ability to have the beacons go off in front of Seeliger, they go off in front of Carson High, and they go off in front of Fremont. So by installing the beacons on Winnie Lane and moving some of the beacons on Mountain Street, we can then have the flexibility to have the times, the flashers go off and have the times be less restrictive all day long. So what staff have kind of proposed as a possible option is to have the beacons turn on at 7 o'clock and turn off 30 minutes after the respective school starts. So if Fritch, I don't know the exact time that Fritch starts, but if Fritch starts at 8:30, then the signs would come on, the flashing beacons would come on at 7, and they would run until 9, half hour after school starts. And then they'd be off all day. And then if Fritch gets out at 3:30, then the flashing beacons would come back on at 3 o'clock, and they would operate until 4 o'clock. So all flashers would come on at 7 o'clock. They'd turn off at some point in the middle of the day, and they'd all come back on at the end of the day and run until 4 o'clock. And that's consistent with a lot of the static signs that we'd still have on some of our local roads. So those are some of the adjustments to Fritch. I'm happy to step through anything specific, but I was going to move to a different school. I was going to move to Eagle Valley.
Well, just a moment.
Yeah.
Can you please go back to Fritch?
You
I
bet.
think it'll be easier for us to actually step through the discussion. So looking at Fritch Elementary, what are the commission members' thoughts on the right-hand side proposed changes? Do we like what they've done? Do you see any other changes that are needed? And do you agree that now that we're going to put flashers there, we should stay in the yellow bubble, I guess, right? So we would reduce Winnie Lane's zone to match the bubbles, in essence. I guess that's a neat way to say it, but pictorially how we can see it. Great?
My question really quick is, what is the MUTCD's guidance on the school zone relative to the 200 and 500 foot buffers at the crosswalks? Do we need to run the zone through those, or are we more concerned with the green areas?
Well, there is no specific guidance other than what I mentioned. It's 200 from a school crossing or 200 feet from the school grounds. So, I mean, I think on Winnie Lane in particular, I don't want to have a school zone that starts and then stops and then starts and then stops again. So because there's those two crosswalks there, we're running it continuous between them.
No, I understand, and that's what I'm getting at is do we trim it at the extent of the lighter yellow, or do we go out to the darker yellow?
Right.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
It's going to be somewhat dictated. I think the short answer is I'd like to focus on no less than the lighter yellow, but it's going to be somewhat dictated by where we can actually put the signs. So while we could try to get exactly on those 200-foot buffers, it's going to be totally dependent on where the physical sign would go.
No, I get that.
It's whether we're going to the 200 or 500. That's 300 feet of difference.
Right,
Right. He's talking about the light yellow versus the dark yellow.
Yeah, I
So
know.
what procedure, what do we want to, or is it you're going to place a sign anywhere between 200 and 500 that you can have an intersection or a placement
That
for
would
the
be-
sign to fit?
Yeah, I hate to say we're going to try to get exactly 200. We're going to try to get 500. I think we want to get in that range, and I'm going to err toward the side of 200 rather than the side of 500.
That's what I'm getting at.
There you go. That's a good way to say it.
That's where I was.
But you're not going to be outside the 500 feet.
We would try not to be outside
So-
of 5, unless there's some specific reason, and when we get to Eagle Valley, we'll talk about
Right.
the potential reason.
Right. So on this map, just because I don't want to leave any map that we're not all agreeing what we're doing on it, then we can talk about ranking them in case you don't have enough money later. But on this map, then what will happen that's not shown here is where you have the green line on Winnie for the zone, you'll actually move that in. I mean, you've got the red circle. It'll be somewhere, you'll show it closer at the outer dark yellow. Like you
Yes,
said, it may
when-
not be the exact place it ends up, but we will be shortening Winnie Lane, which is the big complaint we're getting a lot of. So I just want to be clear, that'll be a small change on this map, is that green line on Winnie Lane would shorten for the zone.
Yes, it would shorten.
Is everybody, are we on that together? Just want to make sure. Greg?
One more question.
Can
Sorry, John, go ahead.
Can I just have a couple questions? And part of it's my eyesight. I can't read every one of these little signs on my handout. Um, so the sign says, speed limit when flashing in all cases. In school zone, 15 mile an hour when flashing. Is that what every sign says?
In this one, right? On the Fritsch group, all of these say when flashing.
Not on Division
And do-
Street.
Oh, wait, one's missing? Which
Except
where's
that's what I
that?
was getting at. So on Division, it will not be when flashing. On Division Street, it will be 15 miles an hour, 7 to 4.
Why is that? If we're putting the flashers
We're
there.
putting flashing beacons on the collector and the arterials. So we were not planning on putting flashers on the local streets, and Division is classified as a local street. So we weren't putting flashing beacons on
I don't
on
understand.
Divisions.
Don't I see a flasher right where that 15 mile an hour on Bath and Division? I don't see a flasher.
That one would face on Bath Street. That would face to the east. That's the existing one today.
And the one on Winnie and Division faces Winnie.
Faces Winnie.
So we can't do those two-sided ones? I've seen those all over
We
where it goes for, why not Division Street? I guess I'm trying to
We
understand.
could possibly look at adding a second head. I've
Right,
seen those as well. I know
right.
the one at Bath and Mountain has like 4 heads facing all kinds of
That's
different
right. It's
directions.
getting every direction. It does. This is our funny one that had a million signs that people couldn't, what am I doing here? Good catch. What do you guys think about that?
If I may, Madam Chair,
Yes.
one question, and that Chris raised as staff when we were talking internally before this meeting is, where do we draw the line of when we install the beacons that give us flexibility to turn off during the day versus not? And the line that staff drew as part of the recommendation for this board is we would consider those when it's considered a regional road, meaning when the traffic volumes are high enough that it's classified as that regional road. In this case, since Division is classified as a local road, that's the reason why it's not displayed on the map as proposed.
So you don't believe that Division has as much traffic as Mountain? And maybe you guys know something. I think Division is a huge travel through that neighborhood, but you would have the stats better than I do. I just think Division cuts all the way across Curry Street, Division Street, huge use, Mountain Street. I don't know, thinking. Lisa?
Although Division, how then it stops, and so there's North Division, and I know North Division,
Yeah.
there's several
It's
North Divisions, but then there
weird.
is that area where it's
Jogs
Bath and
around or
Winnie,
something?
right.
Yeah,
So I think that particular
It's
area
true.
is quite quiet.
I see what you're saying there.
I don't know the volume.
Yeah, I got what she's saying, though. Division's kind of a strange street, the one where we're thinking that does go all the way through and gets, but right behind the school, it actually
Right.
takes a jog. So what do you think about that, Mr. Terry? You brought it up. You think the proposal's
And
fine?
this is going to be, in looking forward, this is kind of going to be an issue on the ones coming up as well, isn't it? That there's going to be a mix.
Yeah, that's
that some-
Thompson when we get into,
Some
yes.
routes, yeah, so some routes are flashing and so it'll only be certain times a day. And then some routes are 7 to 4. I just, so I understand, I don't know if I necessarily have an issue with that. So it could turn out to be a little confusing to people. That's my, I guess.
So the objective, though, that you're thinking of is the more quiet residential street is the one that's going to keep the Monday through Friday 7 to 4, because you have, well, I'm going to say it different. You have driveways where people are backing out onto that street, so it's very residential. If I go to that back section of Division Street, it really is just a residential street versus Mountain is your traffic coming from everywhere to get across town, so.
And I also think that students are more likely to
Be on
walk
Division.
to school via Division in that area where fewer parents, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's
agree
part of
with
the
that too.
reason why when I describe the times for the flashing beacon, we want to still start at 7 and we want to end at 4 so that we're not having different times for different streets. So while Division may be a school zone all day long, it's not going to start earlier or end later than the flashing beacons would start or end. So there'd be
Everything's
that
at 7
consistency.
a.m. and everything ends at 4 p.m.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any more? Everybody else otherwise okay with what we're doing here, other than we're bringing the green? They'll make that adjustment on the zone on Winnie.
Chaz has his hand up.
Oh, Chaz, sorry.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
Laurie?
Yes, go Chaz.
Okay. Well, I understand the discussion so far, but I think we're sending mixed messages, and you're going to get a ton of complaints from people who live on Division saying, that heavily traveled streets have less of a restriction than my local street where people drive much slower anyway. And I actually, since I live fairly close to this, I drive all these streets. And I think the dilemma we're looking at is we don't have enough money to put flashing beacon signs everywhere. But what my suggestion is that we look into at least making the time on the non-flashing beacon signs 2 time slots that align with our best shot at what the flashing beacons are on for. So in other words, if the beacon's on from 7 to 8:30, then the local streets should have the time 7 to 8:30 and 2:30 to 3:30 or whatever it is, or 2:30 to 4. And that way you've got the same time slots covered.
I think that's what we had before and we removed.
Yeah.
But I want to talk on, so let's talk about the Division Street, because I think this will carry through the same message, like you said, on all the other maps. I don't know about Miss Schutte, I can't speak for her. I think that's the area that the public is super happy because it is the heavy residential zone where the children are going. So the parents and everyone are happy that that's a slow it down zone. Because I think that is the residential street where all the children are playing and coming out and walking to school. They're not using Mountain. Like you said, they're using Division Street. So did you get any complaints from anyone on Division? I just want to make sure, because I didn't. No, for you either? All mine were on Mountain,
No, Madam
King
Chair.
Street. Okay.
I want to mention kind of,
Well, you bring up a good point, Laurie. And so maybe, I don't know how, if we have money for a local street survey, for example, it wouldn't seem to be that much if we just stuck it on people's doors and asked them, there's a couple of options here. Would you prefer A or B? And then we'd know.
I think that one of the things that Miss Maloney talked about in her original discussion point on this is, we hadn't done anything in 30 years. And so now we've implemented a little bit, and the phone calls were generated because of the changes. And I think that some of the small residential non-collector type roads, we could, in the next round, if we found some money, do just what you're talking about. Because then we could prioritize those to whether or not they want to keep it 7 to 4, or whether they want us to put beacons on them. When we get the next round of funding, that might be an excellent idea to have the community tell us, no, leave us 7 to 4, or yes, put beacons. I think right now we only have the 300,000 to deal with here tonight, but I think you might be onto a good idea for something over the next few years to determine school by school, have we got this right? And we're looking for consistency. So I think our survey would need to be, like Division Street, Thompson, I think there's some others in here we would look at and see, do you want us to beacon these roads? I think that's a great survey tool that we might be able to implement. Good idea. It's just not going to happen
Yeah,
for this
well,
round of money.
Laurie, that wasn't actually what I was suggesting. I was just suggesting the survey asked them whether they wanted 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on the sign or 7 a.m. to 8:30 and 2:30 to 4.
Oh, no beacon
So
choice?
so the cost of the implementation would not change. It would just be gauging what the local residents would prefer in terms of the time on the non-beacon signs.
I see.
Commissioner
Go ahead.
McQuarrie, I was going to respond. One item that comes to my mind thinking about specific times like that is the school district has very different schedules on a normal year. I think they have a lot of late start days. I think they have a lot of minimum days, early out days, and putting specific times in the AM or the PM limits the ability to have a school zone if the school got out at 11 o'clock or got out early for some reason or started later for some reason. So the flashing beacons still give us that flexibility because we can program that from our office to turn on at different times on those special days. But the static signs don't really give us that ability. So 7 to 4 provides that total coverage should the school day be different for whatever reason on a Wednesday, for instance.
All right, you convinced me.
No, this is a great discussion, and I want to say one other thing for staff. Bringing us this with the bubbles, great job for the new mapping, because I think it's really going to help all of us make a good decision with what we're doing. So whoever came up with the light greens, dark greens, yellows, bubbles, how wonderful this is to actually display and help us see it visually. So great job on that. So are we all comfortable with what we have on Fritch? The only change there, again, they'll move the Winnie Lane zone. Other than that, Miss Maloney, is that your hand or seat one?
I'm good. Thank you,
Oh,
Madam Chair.
sorry.
We covered it.
Okay, great. Then if we're all ready, we'll move on to Eagle Valley.
And I'm going to mention that Kelly Norman, again, she made these maps as
Oh,
well. So
Kelly,
she gets
good
the
for
credit.
you.
She gets the credit.
We might have to give her a nickname with, never mind, I was gonna say Miss Bubbles. I love it. But anyway, they're really wonderful displays. She did a great job. Great job. Okay,
So the next school zone, we're here up on the map is Eagle Valley Middle School. Again, the map on the right side is the existing signage as it sits today. The map on the left side is a possible revision that we can install this summer as part of this project. Left, right?
Right is new.
What's that?
Left is,
The right is new, the left is old. Did I back that up?
yeah,
Whatever.
anyway.
Who knows?
Who's
Gotta go-
right or
gotta go
who's
back to
left?
First
Yeah.
grade. So the changes in this one are again installing flashing beacons in place of the static signs, primarily along Fifth Street. So we would install up to 4 flashing beacons, as shown there on the map on the right side. We would potentially look at other changes, including elimination potentially of Park Hill Drive from the school zone. But this is one of those instances where Hell's Bells would remain as part of the school zone, and that's outside of the bubble, and that's because the number of students who walk from the Empire Elementary School area, the Desatoya, through the multi-use paths over to that Moffett Park area, and over to Hell's Bells, and then walk down Hell's Bells to get to Eagle Valley Middle School. So this is an area where we'd recommend keeping the school zone out toward Hell's Bells Road, which is bigger than those 200, 500-foot bubble areas. But other than that, we can talk about this one, answer any questions.
so unless I'm going to be with Chaz. He took his glasses off so he could see it better.
Zoom in here?
But yeah, isn't there on, I know there is, isn't there? The flasher, no, the little box that says 15, your
Okay,
slow down
you're
is
right.
missing.
Yes,
So that
this
just
would-
needs to be added to the map. We're not
Yes.
suggesting taking it away.
No, that would remain where
Okay.
it is. We would not be
You
changing
just
that.
fix the map to show that there
Yep.
is one.
We just missed that one.
Okay,
That's all right.
no problem. I just noticed that. I thought, we're not taking it out. I just want to make sure. Is there anything, any member, go ahead.
I got the aerial up here on my phone, so I'm looking at it. So why is there no signage coming in northbound on Carson River Road? I mean, I know it's on the opposite corner of the school, but if it's still touching the school property, shouldn't there technically be I'm just throwing that out there.
I'm going to let Lucia take this one.
Uh-oh. Did I?
No, I'll field this one. I had raised my hand just a second ago. No, it's a great question. You know, in Carson Middle, or Eagle Valley Middle, excuse me, has come in recently for a permit to expand that school. And so that's a school zone that we've looked at really heavily. In this instance, as part of the permit, there's a proposal to add a new driveway off of Carson River Road. I don't know, Chris, is it about 200 feet south of Carson River and East Fifth? Very close. But the walking patterns of the students, of the pedestrians, isn't such that we anticipate pedestrians on Carson River. Carson River is mostly used as a kind of an egress route or access route for residents that live kind of over on the Buzzies Ranch area. And so staff did not recommend extending that school zone. However, we would note that we're going to keep an eye on it. And with the addition of that driveway, you know, there may warrant future adjustments in the future, and that's okay too.
Okay. Fair enough.
So just as a thought on the Carson River Road, because you can't tell from this map, but anybody that's driven it to that new driveway location is, I don't know if we need a sign that even is just a warning sign that there will be left-hand turns, just especially, I don't know if like that first 3 months or something when the school starts and people driving on Carson River Road will not be used to people making a left-hand turn to go into that new driveway. So I don't know if we have any special warning signs or just something that says, you know, beware, there'll be left-hand turn, because there was no driveway there before or anything. So they're just used to going right to that stop sign. And so we may have a little bit of conflict in the beginning. So I just ask you to think about it. Maybe when we're doing that new driveway in there for that new one-way that they're going to do, if there's any warning sign. Or sometimes don't we even drive up like a trailer that puts something up and just flashes and warns for a little while till people become accustomed to the left-hand turns? I just want to say that on the record. Does anyone else have any otherwise we're good with this map? Chaz?
Yeah, so I can't remember. Further south, Carson River Road speed limit is 40, but I can't remember what it is right as you approach the intersection with Fifth Street. Is it 40 all the way up to the stop sign?
Yes.
So that it may sort of speak to what you just raised, Laurie, that if you reduce the speed limit to 25 miles an hour, 100 feet or so south of the new driveway for the school circulation change, that might also speak to slowing people down as they get near the driveway.
Yeah, I think from Campbell area into Carson River Road, like I said, it's a huge downward, it doesn't look like it on a map, but it truly is visibility problem. I drive it every single day, several times. So I think that's just, as Ms. Maloney said, we're going to have to watch that area after that new construction gets in there and really decide the impacts and what signage. I agree with Chaz, we just want to put it on the record for you to kind of watch the impact there so that we didn't fix one problem and create another. So, but anybody want anything else? Oh,
I have a
Shooty. Yes.
So, and I think you already spoke to this, but so the end school zone that is off of East Fifth, was that a mistake? That area, is that sign not going to be there? That is within the flashing beacon?
On Park Hill, is that, or on,
Yes.
I think that's Park Hill.
On Park Hill, yes.
Yeah, so Park Hill, we put a sign up, and I'll zoom in here. We put a sign up on Park Hill on one end, and we're going to remove that and put an end school zone, so that if you turn that corner, the school zone would essentially end. So
It's a
if you make
fix.
a left or a right, instead of being another school zone sign, it'll be an end school zone sign.
Okay, so the school zone is on Hell's Bells, but not on Park Hill.
What possible revision would be to remove Park Hill.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. Anybody else? Okay, so the only thing is a drawing issue on this one. Everybody else is okay with, we'll move past Eagle Valley. Okay, next.
So the next school is Borderwick Bray Elementary, and this one kind of goes, hand in hand with Carson Middle since they're kind of overlapping, as you can see on the maps. But again, on the left side is the existing 2020 signs as there are today, and on the right is the 2021 possible revisions. And so what we're looking at revising with this particular school zone is, again, installation of flashing beacons. And we would install a number of flashing beacons primarily along King Street and on Mountain Street. And so as you come in from Division, for instance, we would remove the static sign and we'd put flashing beacons coming into or westbound into Borderwick Bray area. This one also has additional speed feedback signs, as you see there shown in the circles there, both on both sides of King Street in front of Borderwick Bray. We're also proposing to remove portions of Mountain Street and Telegraph Street, as well as potentially Musser Street from the designated school zone areas. And so those are reflected by those circles kind of on the upper edge of the map where they're blank circles. And we're looking at removing those school zone signs and moving them closer to the actual schools, closer to the actual bubbles that we've been talking about. So those are the primary changes associated with this school zone. And it kind of overlaps into Carson Middle. So let me just step into Carson Middle real quick and we can come back to Borderwick Bray. But beacons kind of coincide, going hand in hand with these two. And so again, on King Street, there's some overlap on the map on the right side with some of the beacons and signing. But again, we'd be looking at removing some of the static signs up near Ormsby and King and along Ormsby itself that were installed in 2020 and replacing those with flashing beacons in those locations. So those are the potential changes for those two schools, and I covered them, as I said, because there is quite a bit of overlap between the two.
Go back to the previous slide. So that Thompson that we see on this one, those again are consistent with what we did on Division Street. That is the local housing, more residential, and it's got the Brewery Arts Center too. But for the most part, further down, all there is a direct residential road, not a collector and a heavy traffic.
Correct.
So we're consistent in that thought so far.
And the same thing is consistent with like Richmond as well, where it's a local road. And so Richmond, right adjacent to Carson Middle, would just have static signs.
Richmond has like two schools, right? Both ends of Richmond, because the Catholic school
Oh, yeah. I'm
is
talking
there
about the
too. Okay, I'm
north-
like, wait a
north
minute,
Ri-
let me get the right
North
schools.
Richmond.
I'm like, wait, isn't there another school there? Does anybody want any changes or thoughts on Borderwick Bray? Mr. Terry?
I have a couple questions. And again, I drive this almost every day and used to drive it a lot more. So, Chris, your earlier discussion, well, first of all, with this revision, is there going to be now a gap again between the two schools, between Borderwick Bray and the junior high school, or is it going to stay a school zone continuously like it is now?
It would stay a school zone continuously, and so whichever school
how
had
I
the
read that,
later,
okay.
whichever school had the later start or the later or the earlier end, those beacons would cover the worst or the longest period. So potentially these
Okay, so
beacons
that-
would go longer than some of the other beacons.
But they
Okay,
will
that
move to
answers- Gonna be
beacons.
my second question. You're not gonna have
Right.
different times on the different beacons, one for the junior high and one for the grade school. You're just gonna extend it so it covers whichever is earlier or later
Yes.
and have a long, okay, that answers my question. That
Yes.
was, yeah.
Good. Greg?
One question I have is on the speed feedback signs. It almost seems to me on Border Bray where we have them, like the horse has already left the barn. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're already halfway across the school, and if you're speeding, it's like, oh, should they be a little bit further out? I don't know what the direction is from the MUTCD on location of those.
There is no, to my knowledge, there is no specific description of where they should or shouldn't go. My personal opinion is that I like them in the school zone to capture the speed that you're going in the school zone. If we were to put them at the entrance of the school zone, then they're going to pick up the vehicle before it reaches the school zone. And so if they're programmed to flash at 15, they're going to be flashing at your car well in advance of when you actually have to go 15. So I don't want to send a message to potentially confusing somebody that far in advance. So I like to have them in the school zone. That way they capture the speed you're actually going and should be going in the school zone. That's my thought.
Let's put it to you this way, no matter what you do, you're going to confuse somebody,
Okay.
okay?
Me? Yeah, that's a gimme.
But I guess what I'm saying is, I agree they should be in the school zone, but I think they should,
Close.
my opinion, since you asked, is to have them a little bit more at the extent of the school zone. I personally don't care if it's picking them up 50 feet outside of the school zone. It's going to give them a warning that they better slow down. That's my opinion.
And I think that's a good opinion. I would like to.
This discussion
I would
here.
like- One of the things I like about the speed feedback is I think they can also be used in instances, and maybe this one in the westbound Borderwick Bray is a good example. Maybe we can move that to a different location to capture people coming off of Mountain Street. They've passed a beacon, they've turned a corner. Maybe there's not a beacon right when they turn that corner. Maybe the speed feedback sign serves as a beacon, quasi-beacon, to remind you that it's still a school zone. So we could look at potentially some different options to capture more cars if they're coming in the middle of the school zone, for instance.
I like that idea.
Something to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
And so none of us have a problem if they do any slight adjustments to where those signs are. That, again, when you're actually in the field and, well, they're going to do what I did on Bray. I had a grand time because I drove the entire zone forward, backwards, each side street. And then I called Lucia and said, I've never been so confused in my whole life of what I'm supposed to be doing where. So I really appreciate the work here. This is where I got the most complaints because they would drive 15 feet and the sign said something different. And then 15 more feet, you got a flasher. Then right. So I like your idea, and certainly I think the flexibility is fine. If you see something that, whoops, I can grab this side street at the same time that's entering, that would be a good idea.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying we need to come back, if we have a 1 foot
Yeah, don't,
change. in the
right, that's what I
location.
said.
mean,
Don't come back here. You're on the right track.
Now, if it's 3 feet,
There you go. What was it, the 10% rule? You don't have to come back? We're just giving you a bad time, Chris. Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll accept this one. Everybody's good?
Madam Mayor, if I may ask a point of clarification.
Yes.
Chris, if you don't mind putting the map back up. I did want to ask a point of clarification on Telegraph and Mountain on this one. They do extend a fair amount north and east, sort of up there.
Oh, he said he was going to adjust that.
Did that make
That's
it on
what-
the record?
Oh, yes.
Is that what our
Right, we all
TC would like
agreed
to see
that Telegraph and Mountain, we're going to stay as close to the bubbles as we can.
yes.
Okay, that's great to put it on the record. Thank you.
So in my notes, would the proposal be maybe pull Telegraph back to Mountain and then pull Mountain to Telegraph?
Yeah, it's the Mountain and Telegraph, correct? What about that to Iris? The Mountain to Iris? Are we eliminating that?
I think one potential option would be to pull Mountain back to near the bubble or near the beacon at Musser. Pull Telegraph back up to maybe near Iris.
Right.
And as well, I would consider, or I would ask for this board's consideration of potentially adjusting Musser as well, from pulling it from Minnesota back to Mountain.
Let me find Minnesota. Oh, I see over here.
Where's Minnesota?
Mm-hmm. To fix that piece also.
Right next to Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's right next to Wisconsin. That was great. So we would, yeah. I see what you're, because the end zone is where you've got the new
End zone,
circle, so
end
you would
zone.
pull that back to there, or close to, like you said, it is close to the cross sections as we're discussing. It might not be exact. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes, and now I have one more question.
Okay, did we miss one?
No, my question has to do with St. Teresa,
Richmond.
which is in the lower left corner. So what is the city's responsibility on safe routes to schools in relation to this Catholic school? Because I see we have school zones laid out on Richmond and West Fifth, but no signage. Is that something that,
We have signed St. Teresa as part of our school zone project last summer. We haven't, it's not one of the four we're looking at right now, but in the long term, it's one we could potentially put beacons
Okay.
on as well.
okay, just curious.
No, good question. Okay, we'll move on then. All right, thank you. Next.
Yeah, so the last school is Carson Middle, as I covered a minute ago. And so basically the changes are to remove the static sign and put a flashing beacon on King Street, put 2 flashing beacons on Ormsby Boulevard, and cover those areas, as well as some other miscellaneous movement of signs to make sure we're not in conflict. But this is one, here's North Richmond against the school. It's another local street that would remain with the static signs as 7 to 4.
Just a question. I think they're called radar pods, I think I learned yesterday. Do we need another radar pod going the other direction on King up there?
We could certainly add a speed feedback sign on the other side of King for westbound traffic. We could do that.
If the money allows, I think we should finish the project there so we have both directions. Anybody else have any other comment, add, change they want to the maps on this one? No?
I have comments just in general, not necessarily just on this one.
Okay.
The mayor had brought up earlier the issue of putting up the trailers. Like I know when you did this last project, you put the trailers up and said new speed zone ahead or school zone ahead or whatever. Are you going to have to do that pretty much for all of these changes to notify people that these changes have been made, or have you thought about that yet?
I don't know that we've thought about that yet, Commissioner Terry, but I think the beacons will stand out a little bit more than the signs, but I think it's still something we could consider, definitely.
And my next question is, you mentioned, so the control of the time of these is going to be handled by Carson City Public Works, not by the school districts?
Correct. Carson City Public Works, our control systems group, programs all of the flashing beacons every school year across the city.
Okay, that was really my two questions. So that, and I guess one other is, you're doing these, but obviously you're not now doing all schools in Carson City. You haven't done the high school, you haven't done St. Teresa's, et cetera. Are there any concerns that you kind of have two different situations going on? You know, now you've gone to beacons on these schools, but you have numerous other places that are still static signs. I don't think there's anything you can do about that, but I think it is going to add a little bit of confusion.
I think as we get additional funding over the next few years, we'll have the opportunity to address more school zones. The 7 to 4, keeping that time frame consistent, I think will provide some clarity in a lot of those cases, so that you're not, it's 7 to 4 over here, but it's 8 to 3 over here, or something like that, for those different areas. But I agree. I think St. Teresa's is another school that could, Fifth Street in particular, could use some changes. Maybe Stewart Street or some other areas where some changes could be implemented as funding allows.
So now let's talk about the reason these are projects that are here is at the Board of Supervisors, we allocated $300,000, and these were based on phone calls that all of us as board members were receiving. Do any of you think we missed, or that there's a school zone that is of higher priority to put the beacons? I think we've really hit the major thoroughfares, but are we missing one that should be considered? that would have been a higher priority, because I think that's what we were really interested from the Board of Supervisors level, is have the RTC really tell us, we think these are the roads, because that's what people are calling us about. But is there another major school in town, in town that you can think of that we really need to address? Usually I do get phone calls if there's issues, and I'm not, except for one more that we'll talk about in a moment. But anything else rise to anybody's thoughts? Is a school that those that worked on the plan? I just want to double check before we final this over to the Board of Supervisors. Sealiger, all of Solomon is flashed, so that takes 3 schools. If we get 5th Street, that's gonna, King Street. We're really getting, what are we missing? What are the,
In the future, we'll have to look at Robinson as development occurs. So that's another street we can consider in the future.
okay, but we're getting a pretty good, again, we're not solving it all because we don't have the money, but, so then let's talk about one that I want to, and I don't know if you can zoom in on it or help me a different way. He was really good with the computer yesterday, but I did pre-tell him that I also have received numerous calls and discussions on, he's going right to it for me because I did in advance talk about it. So we have Pioneer High School, and so on Stewart Street, the school district added a parking lot and did some changes at, I don't know, Lisa and I have been here a long time, and yes, I admit I went to Corbett when it was an elementary school, but now it's a high school. So I have received numerous complaints about, we can't see exactly where it is, can we? It's kind of, yeah, there you go, thank you. They put a 7 to 4 Monday through Friday static sign there for school, and I have numerous complaints and thoughts of just removing that one, since there's a fence and no way for them to go to school that way. And it's high schoolers and very few. It's a small school. So I just want to bring that up for discussion as to the value of that, having that school. Anybody see on Stewart Street a need for it to stay? That we need to change it to a beacon? Everybody, we all drive here in town, so.
Madam Mayor, this is
Yep,
Lucia Maloney, Transportation Manager. After you had raised this question yesterday, staff talked offline about this. This was a school zone that was added as part of the 2020 redesignation. Just to give you a little more background, the designated school zone, if Chris can pull up the map, it does exist on Stewart as well as on Corbett. It goes a little bit to the east on Corbett and a little bit to the east on Park. If it were the recommendation of RTC, staff would be okay with and supportive of pulling back that school zone just to the west of Stewart, if that was something that you wanted to do in response to the comments you received.
So I think it kind of fits with what we were talking about on the other ones, that the small residential streets stay with the static signs, but the major thoroughfares either get beaconed, and I'm just suggesting on Stewart Street, and I'm willing to listen, that we take that one sign out for the zone there, and I'm okay. So you're suggesting it's, well, near the cracker box as it makes that curve, that's the one you would take out? I want to be clear on the record what we're talking about.
I think you're saying potentially adjust the signage. My comment was if the RTC wanted to recommend removing that designation to the Board of Supervisors, staff wouldn't be opposed to that change either as an option.
Okay. What are other members? Everybody okay with recommending to the board? Yes, I just want to make sure so we can again put it on the record so staff knows.
So I can walk through this map real quick.
Thank you.
So this is the map that we used to install the signs this past summer 2020. The yellow lines here are the designated school zone areas. And so you can see the school zone on Stewart Street starts at John Street and runs up all the way to Adams Street. And so we installed static signs at the just south of Adams, and we installed static signs on Stewart just north of John Street. We also installed static signs on John, on Fall, Corbett, and Park, both east and west of Stewart Street itself. So I just wanted to point that out. So the yellow, as I said, is the designated school zone around Pioneer High School.
And so the discussion point is to remove Stewart Street from this, change the school zone, correct? I just want to make sure we're all on the, so we'll be keeping the school zone right around, where is it? Corbett, Fall, John, the place where all the residential houses are. And we'll just be pulling, now it's, I like my colored bubbles, because that really helps us. But,
So
and it's not even green, I'm looking at yellow, so I'm really confused now. But we're talking about, right, just taking them off the Stewart Street, changing the zone.
So taking it off completely, not putting a
Correct.
beacon.
Taking it off completely. That's the major, well, they take Roop Street and then hook over onto Stewart Street from North Ridge. That's a major pass-through for the community.
We didn't have all the bubbles for every school zone. I apologize,
Well,
Madam Chair.
I'm,
Short
hey,
some
I am
bubbles.
looking for Kelly, because I am telling you, she's a superstar. So anybody have any issues? Everybody okay with that, the recommendation? Okay.
What is the current speed limit there when the school zone's not?
Well, that's our
What
problem.
is
They
the-
changed it to a 7 to 4, Monday through Friday, 15. And my phone has not
And-
quit ringing.
And what is it? Is it 25 or 35 there when it's not a school
Oh.
zone?
I believe this
shoot.
portion of Stewart
25?
is 25.
Yeah, 25.
Right.
Good question, though. Good, that's a good question. Okay. So I just want to circle back around then. Do we have enough for everybody to understand where we're going? And I can just do the motion as discussed on record. You have all the notes needed? Just want to make sure. What, do you need any clarification, Ms. Maloney?
Madam Mayor, if I may summarize.
Yes.
For purposes of the motion, what I wrote down was the four, excuse me, move to authorize staff to expend the $300,000 from the general fund to implement the school zone modifications as discussed on the record, including recommending to the Board of Supervisors to adjust the school zones on Winnie Lane from Mountain to Division, on Telegraph to pull it back to Iris, on Mountain to pull it back to Musser, on Musser to pull it back to Mountain from Minnesota, and to remove Stewart Street and the associated residential streets to the east of Pioneer High School. Did I capture all that?
Yep, everybody good? Okay, great. Do I want someone, I'll take a motion. And you can read it just as it's presented because she has summarized for the record the answer for you. Which is helpful.
I move to authorize staff to expend $300,000 from the general fund to implement the school zone modifications as discussed on the record.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you all. That was a lot of work, but great job. And again, please let Ms. Norman know how much we appreciate her new nickname. It's better than Sherry Russell's that we gave her for the budget, so. Oh, that's great. That's great. It's a term of endearment. Okay, we're going to move on then to agenda item 60 for the feasibility study discussion on the transit. I believe, hold on, get my, yep. I know. Oh, I got 6A, 6B. I accidentally got rid of 6C. So are you going to start that, Lucia?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Lucia Maloney, Transportation Manager. Keep this brief. The Jack Transit Development and Coordinated Human Services Plan, which serves as our long and short range plan for Jack Transit, it was adopted in 2019, and in it identified a need for downtown transit center to address current deficiencies with Jack's existing transfer center on North Plaza, just south of Washington. A proposed downtown transfer center is supported by the Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization's 2050 Regional Transportation Plan that was adopted recently. Staff are looking for a formal authorization to pursue a preliminary feasibility study for this project. It has been discussed for the past decade or so, but staff want to make sure that this is supported by RTC in the short term. We haven't, put a lot of work or thought into exactly what the scope of this contract would provide, but we're anticipating it could cost up to around $60,000. There is existing available local match from the general fund transfer for fiscal year 21 within the transit fund, and this could be reimbursed with existing available FTA Section 5307 grant funding at a rate of up to 50%. So with your authorization, staff would pursue a small contract, and the idea would be for someone to look at options for us for a downtown transit center. We sort of have our eye on a potential building that could be potentially purchased or leased downtown nearby, but there could be other options, potentially a vacant parcel where you could build a transit center. So at least in my mind, the idea would be to conduct this feasibility study and come back with some options, long-term funding needs should the city want to pursue those options, and just give us a better understanding of where we would go next and if we wanted to do this and pursue a larger investment. I'll stop there and just say that in the exhibit is the excerpt from the transit plan if you want to see more information about the deficiencies, about the current transfer, and I'm happy to answer additional questions or go into more detail. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions of Ms. Maloney? No? Okay, I'll take a motion if anyone would like to make one. Mr. Stedfield.
I move to authorize a preliminary feasibility study as presented.
Do you have a second?
I second.
I have a motion and a second for the approval of the preliminary feasibility study. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're getting there. We're almost done. We're going to move to agenda item number 7A, the Transportation Manager's Report. Ms. Maloney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two quick items. As most of you are aware, Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, CAMPO, is a direct recipient of FTA Section 5310 and Section 5339 transit funding. Every year we open those up for a call for applications to distribute that funding. RTC is potentially an eligible recipient of those funds and has received those funds for the last several years. CAMPO staff, Mr. Goring, is working on opening that application with our transit coordinator, Alex Cruz, and so we anticipate that application will open in the next couple weeks. There's about $530,000 available in FTA funding for those two grants, so you can expect to see that open soon. I did also want to give an update on the Colorado Street project. Staff put out a request for proposals for survey work for the Colorado Street project. We're evaluating those proposals, and that will be awarded, and we'll start advancing design really soon in the next few weeks. So Colorado Street continues to move forward as well. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Maloney. Next on the agenda is the street activity report. We have two for December 2020 and January 2021. Ms. Maloney, is there something you wanted to highlight on those?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As is normal, these are a little bit retroactive. The first report is for December, and the second one is for January. I can go into additional detail or answer questions if needed, but the highlights here is, when it's really cold, we do our crack filling work when the cracks are really wide, and we put in the rubber. So you'll see the crack seal operations is high. You'll see a fair amount of sidewalk and flat work. It's been a nice winter. There hasn't been too much snow, so we've been able to catch up a little bit on those. And then stormwater, sediment removed from ditches, those types of activities. You see a lot of that in the winter as well. So I just wanted to highlight those items in the two reports.
So I have just a general question. The graffiti damage on signs, is that really quite common that you can't clean them, or is that cleaning? And it could be something you get back to me, because it says signs replaced due to graffiti. So are we getting a brand new sign? They're not, again, you can get back to me with your street staff.
No, that's
tell
a
me.
question. In that specific line item where it says 26 for December, for example, those were signs replaced. It happens periodically. I could get a report back though and follow up on whether there's more or less than normal, or if that's an abnormal amount. But that is what that item is.
And whether any of them do we also have, we've done 67 fiscal year to date, which is half a year. And then do we get any recovery ever? Are we ever lucky enough to catch them and anyway, just wondering.
I can inquire and get back to you.
Thank you. Just one of those, I'm like, wow, I wonder how much that's costing us. Okay, anybody else? No? Okay, then 7C. It looks like Chris is going to do this.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Martinovich, Transportation Engineer. I'll tee this up real quick by saying that next month we plan to bring a little bit more detail on 3, potentially 4 projects. East 5th Street project, Appian Way Signal potentially, as well as Long Street, which is in this report, and additional information on Center Drive project, which is in this report. So I just wanted to mention that. I'll breeze through a couple of those when we get there. So the project status report, the first project, Carson Street Complete Streets project. This one is very near completion. You've probably seen them doing landscaping, and they'll be continuing to do landscaping until that's completed. Probably in the next couple of months or so, we should be wrapping up with most of that. On the freeway multi-use path to Colorado Street, that one is essentially completed. They have to do some hydro seeding in one particular slope that they had to do some additional work, and so there was some erosion control work that has to be done. But other than that, that project's complete and open for use. The other multi-use path that we've been working on, this is the one from Colorado Street down to the Edmond Sports Complex. This one's been slowed down a little bit. NDOT has asked for some additional cultural resources review with the State Historic Preservation Office. So this one has been delayed slightly while we complete that work. NDOT's going to complete that work as part of this project. The next one, Kings.
One favor, back on the, to Colorado Street.
Yes.
So we budgeted $1,141,000 and we spent 9.9. That's pretty, are we going to have excess budget? It's going to come in under budget?
There's still retention to be released, but it should come in a little bit under budget. And this one's TAP funded, so it's that 95% federal, 5% local. And so most of that TAP money will go back to NDOT, but we'll have the 5% that we won't spend as well.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Well, it's catching up. You're fast tonight. Go.
I'm on Kings Canyon. I think.
Chris, I have
Sorry.
a question.
Yes.
On the freeway multi-use path to Edmond Sports Complex. One would have thought that they'd done the environmental and cultural work when they built the freeway. So I'm just curious why it's coming up now when almost all this path is in the right of way.
I'm not sure if I can answer that question, Chaz. I'd have to chat with NDOT to see what the specific reasons are that they're raising this now.
That's not a bad question.
Yeah, I mean, a year seems like a long delay I can understand the need to address cultural issues, but it seems to me they should have been addressed when they did the freeway.
And maybe Commissioner Terry can speak to this as well, but I think the freeway environmental could be older, and maybe that time period, and they have to reevaluate because that period of time has expired. They do have a shelf life. I don't know what that is, so that could be. I'm kind of speculating.
I'd be speculating as well that, yes, I agree. The freeway should have done right-of-way to right-of-way cultural resources when it was done years ago. And I don't see why that would have changed. perhaps it's the small segments that are outside of that cone. So I'm not sure.
Thanks.
I have a quick question on the path. Is it going to be kind of a bridge over the freeway or?
The path will use the Clearview Bridge to cross the freeway.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So on Kings Canyon, we've talked about that one in the past. No specific updates, and I gave a little update on the construction earlier tonight. On the Roop Street Rehabilitation Project, this one has been delayed a little bit. We're still looking at potentially starting design this summer with construction into 2022. Fairview Drive Rehabilitation Project, this project is completed. The contractor has been paid. This is the water line as well as repaving and curb gutter and sidewalk work between South Carson and Roop Street. It's all finished, and we'll be removing this from the list. And this did come in a little bit under budget. There will be some savings on the STBG side, which we can roll over into another project, and there'll be some savings on the water utility fund, which we'll go back to that fund.
Great.
The Airport Road Utility Replacement Project, this is the sewer and water line replacement project there between Minowie and William Street. It's essentially completed. They finished their last striping, and they're cleaning up. I think they had to change a couple of valve covers because they were the wrong color. So they're cleaning up those items. Again, this one, all the extra funding, this was a small amount of STBG funding. We're going to spend all of that. And so any leftover budget on this project will go back to the wastewater fund is what I've been told. The next project is the Northridge Drive Reconstruction Project. This one we awarded back in December, and construction is slated to start right at the beginning of June of 2021. District 2 Long Street, I will be bringing this one, kind of a summary of this next month as to the status of this, as well as some of the design components that we're implementing as part of this project. So we'll bring that, you'll see that one next month. Telegraph Street Pavement Reconstruct Project, this is the one downtown. This project is completed. We put in a rapid rectangular flashing beacon at Carson Street and Telegraph Street. So we're looking to close this out. There is a few punch list items left, and we'll release retention. I'm told that pretty much all of the project budget will be spent once the retention is released, so there won't be any additional returning. Robinson Street Sewer Project, this one is close to 90%. They're anticipating bidding here late spring and construction as indicated there in July. Colorado Street CDBG project, this is one we talked about, I think it was last month, and we'll be bringing back kind of a 30% concept potentially in June to talk about some of the curb extensions and some of the median treatments for your guys' consideration and input on. So look for that probably in June. Some of our District 3 projects. This is our Deer Run Road Pavement Preservation Project is the next one. This runs from Sedge Road up to East Highway 50. And this is just primarily a micro slurry of that area, as well as restriping and some other shoulder work. Similarly, on Clear Creek, this is by Costco at that area, Fuji Park. It's a Type 3 modified slurry, and we're at 60% on these, and we'll get these out to bid here soon and constructed this summer. And then the last project on the list is the Center Drive Reconstruction Project. And again, I'll bring a little bit more detail to this as to what the scope of the work is and some possible alternatives related to this project next month. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any further questions on item 7C? No? No? Thank you. Great job. Okay, so now it's the time for any board comments. So I'll start with those on the WebEx. So Chaz, any comments?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Terry, do you have any comments?
No.
Are you leaving us?
Yes, I had a grandchild born in Colorado, and my wife and I decided to put in an offer on a house there, and it was accepted. So in the near future, we will be moving to Colorado, so I will have to resign. And I will follow up with some sort of resignation letter once the time is established.
Okay. Well, that's just wrong. I'm glad that you have a new grandchild, but that is just wrong. Thank you for your service. If it comes sooner than later, I didn't want to leave tonight in case I don't know, someone bought your house tomorrow or something. So again, thank you, and hope we can find someone as good to replace you. So thank you for your service. Ms. Schutte? Nothing? Greg, anything from you? I just have one comment because I had said I was going to do that for the public, and I was remiss slightly. We had the comment concerning Bordewick's drop-off, the ability for them to drop the students off, that there's insufficient zone to do that. And I just wanted to really put on the record tonight that we do recognize it's an issue. I think it's been a long-standing one. It's not, that school's been there a very long time, and there hasn't been any change there. We have passed the information on to the school district, the facilities there, to see if there's any ideas and stuff that they would like to bring forward or permit for change, because it starts at the school district for that. So I just wanted to put that on the record to answer the public comment. Let's see. And the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for April 14th. In this room. Again, 4:30, we'll probably have CAMPO and then RTC. Then we'll move on. Do you need something? Or you're making sure I'm going to do final public comment?
No, I was going to give a public comment.
Oh, I'm ready for public comment. There you go, Todd. I could tell. I'm like, he's ready. Public comment, Mr. Reese.
This is Todd Reese, Deputy DA. I just wanted to let everybody know that with the changing of assignments, this is the last meeting that I will be with you. Adam Tully, who is sitting in the audience here, will be staffing the CAMPO and RTC boards moving forward. And I just wanted to say thank you, and it's been a pleasure working with everybody.
Wonder if I didn't have the same answer. No, it's just not right. We welcome you, Adam. You got big shoes to fill. Todd's been a wonderful attorney for us, so we're going to count on you. Welcome to the team. Do I have any other final public comment?
No one on the line. May I make a suggestion about 6C?
You have a
My name's
public
Jordan
comment?
Edens, for the record.
You have a public comment?
Yeah.
Absolutely, you may make public comment.
Okay. I will come out real quick.
I got to go backwards and figure out 6C. Hi.
Jordan Edens, for the record. And I live over on the Fairview side. And
Which
I do
school?
Know,
Which school?
frick. Empire Elementary is like
Okay,
right across
yes,
the way.
Empire, and then, oh, gotcha.
And then there's the Eagle Valley, so they kind of overlap the school zones a little bit there.
Yes, they do.
There is a crosswalk that I think would benefit from some of the lighting, like they put in down.
Oh, you want a a beacon for the
Yeah.
school crosswalk, like we did on Stewart Street.
Yeah, not where the stoplight is,
Right.
but down by where like the Lady Molly's is, because I noticed that a lot of the kids come.
They
up
cut
the
that
path,
through.
cut through there, and that's like right where the school zone begins and ends. So something to look into, possibly, just as a little suggestion, because I know people kind of speed through there too.
Yeah, and that's even why one of your school district changes with Eagle Valley is because the kids definitely cut through. They definitely do that. You are
Yeah.
correct.
Cool.
The children find the fastest path to school, just like the cars in our town find the fastest path to travel.
Exactly.
So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Okay,
Thank
and then
you.
we didn't have any other public comment on the line. Just to make sure I don't have any other public comments, so I can technically adjourn.
No other public comment.
Oh, thank you so much. So if there's no further business to come before us, no objections, we're adjourned. Thank you all for such a great meeting. Good job.